one of these fine days, there has to be something positive that
Something
we can talk
has
about.
got to give at some point, man.
Really, there has to be something, because when you look at all of these things, all of these things are very key, yet we're back into political headlines. Full-blown politics, as I call it.
That's what I was telling you. We need to make these people stop earning money. As long as they're earning money, then life goes on. Okay?
Can they get 99% pay cut?
Why are they getting 99?
So that we just give them 1%
They should
for
stop.
being around.
We should send them home. You see those people, that the Kenyans who are saying, I am at home, I have lost my income. We should start with these politicians. Every politician, home, no income. Then we will we use the other people. We have very many other people who can help us. What do we need? We need to start thinking about budget and how to pass the next budget. All right, so the guys at the National Treasury, they can do that. The guys at the Ministry of Planning, which is still the National Treasury, they can do that. We can bring in experts like economists, like the one we brought to talk to, Wangari Muikia. She's a public finance management expert. She can help, come up, draft one or two things in the next financial budget. And then in the final minute, we just call MPs, wait, Sama, yes, Sawa. We're good. We move in the meantime. So let's just go back to where we were, okay? There's data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. They conducted a survey. They're about to begin the next survey from tomorrow to look at the impacts going forward. So what they are showing us is a huge percentage of our population has lost an income. Because of that, there's a huge percentage of our population that is unable to meet the basics, that is afford food and afford shelter. If you cannot pay rent, you're basically saying that you're not able to put a roof over your head, right? A huge percentage, more than 50% of those who have lost jobs are women. 30% of those who have lost jobs are men. Then we immediately we went into COVID. We had these measures that were announced by the government to cushion the economy and going forward, and those were rolled out. And we spoke to the CS for the National Treasury and Planning, and they told us, look, budget making is a complex thing. You guys need to understand.
Yeah.
When we say that there's a reduction by 2% of VAT, 2%, it has a trickle-down effect because the cost of production comes down, the cost of the goods come down, and therefore the people in the grassroots are able to afford their food. It's going to be cheaper. All right. When we say that there's a reduction in the amount of corporate tax paid by companies, what we are saying is we are increasing the liquidity of those companies so that those companies are able to retain their staff a bit longer. Even if you don't have as much revenues, you can still afford to pay your staff even a percentage of their pay. That trickle-down effect. When we say that those who earn 24,000 and below, which is a majority of those in formal employment, are going not to pay as you earn, it means that we are putting cash in their hands. They receive a salary. They are not going to pay this tax. They have more money. And when they have more money, we have said they have more spending power. When they have more spending power, then they're able to buy. When they're able to buy goods and services, they're supporting the economy. See that picture? Looks very well on paper. Then the data comes out. People cannot pay rent. Data comes out that we have very many vulnerable people in our population who are unable to live. So the question therefore is, are those measures good measures? Did those measures actually make sense? Were those the best measures that our government could have put in place?
Are those measures formed by, are they informed properly? Because you take a measure and it must be informed. By the time you're making this decision, something informed that. It's not just because it seems like you're then just pulling things out of the air. If truly the data that you have, the information that has been presented to you is what then fuels this decision, then I wouldn't have a problem with that. But it seems that this is totally different. And I don't want us to be on this crutch of we don't have the money. No, stop it. Tell me something else. It's not about that, unfortunately. It cannot
Maybe we
be.
don't. Let's ask the people who actually, have some insiders in government. And that's one of the people we're talking to this morning. Wangari Muikia, she's a public finance management specialist. She is a lead consultant with Expertise Global Consulting. Wangari, good morning.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Good morning,
Wangari.
Everybody's not doing well. I'm the only one who's okay, a little bit okay.
Clearly, I've been listening in and things I think in the studio.
And I'm not okay. I've reached that point where I'm like, we're all gonna die.
So you're actually doing worse than us, guys.
So
I guess everybody's asking themselves, but did you die?
Yeah, but did you die? So just leave, man. Just leave. So Wangari, you've had the conversation. We're asking ourselves, the government had come up with these measures. They on paper, they say those are very good measures. They go a long way. Instead of just giving people handouts left, right, and center, they go a long way. At the same time, there's also handouts. There's handouts to the vulnerable population. There's handouts now to 100,000 very vulnerable people. There's also cash handouts to the youth. And these are not handouts. They're basically being made to collect rubbish. And then they're paid. Are these good measures?
Well, to some extent they are, and I think in the time when they were making these decisions, they were trying to make it in a very high pressure period where they're trying to do something quickly. So some may have hit the mark, and some may not have hit the mark. So let's go through some of the things that we think could have been thought of better. So you talked about the VAT, you talked about income tax, you talk about the reliefs that are coming to the vulnerable. Now, giving the people who are earning 24,000 or less a tax relief, you have to think that before we were also thinking, the people who were receiving reliefs were previously, I think, earning 19,000 or less.
Yep.
So the only new people who are getting tax reliefs are between that bracket of, I think, 19,000 and 24,000. And exactly. So so it's not like that relief is really reaching the people down, because the people who are vulnerable were already not paying that tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why we see the KNBS report saying that people are still in stress, because those people are already in stress.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Yeah.
So
it's not a new situation. Now, when we move now to the question of cash transfers. Now, cash transfers are kind of a bump in revenue or income for people who are in vulnerable households, right? So if you are talking about cash transfers to them, cash transfers are not something that you can live off of,
Yep.
right? They're like 5,000 shillings every 2 months or something like that. Can you really pay rent? Can you really have food on the table? Can you be paying electricity, water without money? No. It's a little bit of a bump up. Now, if someone has completely lost their job and then now the government is sitting around and giving cash transfers, yes, any money is good money. Let me not even front and say 5K cannot make a difference, but it's definitely not going to be able to sustain you going forward.
because it's a one-off anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, it is a one-off. But then I think they're going to do it over a period of time, maybe like 3 months or 6 months or something like that.
Which cash transfer are you talking about? Are you talking about the one for the vulnerable population?
Yes, for the vulnerable population.
Those ones, they already received their 8,000.
But then what can 8,000 do if you have a household, you're with your shosho in the house,
That's
yourself, you have children. First of all, let's remember these children are not in school, And in school they have school feeding programs. Yeah, so now there's even more food that you have to pay. I was doing this webinar the other day, and there was a lady, a casual laborer, talking on the webinar. And she was saying that now she has a deni with a mama mboga on the corner, because now she has to take more and more vegetables to feed her household. So people now are even going into debt. It's really a tragic situation. What I would have advised the government is to think about how they can provide in-kind reliefs, where it really hits the people in their pocket. Give people free electricity for a period. Give them free water for a period. Give them free access to Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is becoming the game changer in this pandemic period, right? If you give them at least those three, and even some sort of rent reliefs, some ability to keep a roof over their heads, once you keep those basic things, then now we can deal with the other big issues going forward.
So I can see how we can do electricity. We just dealing with Kenya Power. We can say that we'll put in some money into KPLC. We can say we'll put in some money into the water management companies, the water companies. All right.
Yes, that is where it will make a difference.
Rent. How do we get this done? How would the government work towards giving rent relief to tenants?
Well, this is now, we need to ask ourselves. The national government has been doing a lot of these interventions. But what about the county governments? Have you heard about the county governments doing any work or contribution to this? I haven't heard any.
No.
Now, county governments, they charge this thing called ground rent or plot rent, where they charge people to live on county land.
Okay.
Yeah. What they could do is provide for people to, some sort of amnesty not to pay that rent over the period, and so that they can have, a place to stay without, thinking about paying rent. So those are some of the things that the government do, especially on government-owned land.
Oh, so for now we say, for example, the county houses in Nairobi, especially in the Eastlands estates. So we are basically telling them, don't pay rent for the next X number of months.
Exactly.
Because their landlord is the county government.
Exactly. That is where the government now has the power. But then now with private landlords, now the government provided for, a reduction in the cash reserve ratio. They reduced the costing that are come at the central bank.
Yeah.
Right? So this was supposed to trickle down to the banks, so the banks then can follow on with loans to people who are vulnerable businesses, such as people who own rental properties. But the problem is, and this is in economic terms, it's called quantitative easing, right? Allowing people to access financing or liquidity from the central bank machinery. But the problem is, even if you give money to the banks, it's not a requirement the banks are not required to then pass that money down to the citizens, because the banks are also thinking about their own risks that they have to deal with, right? They can't just give money to anybody. They have to assess who is good for their money, who should be given money, who has been having a good, strong business. There's all those processes, right? So the money has been released to the banks, but the banks may not be releasing that money down to the people who actually need them. And that is where there's also a big block.
Should the banks be made to release this money? I mean, look, the central bank has sat down, has said, this is what we're going to do to help your customers. And then the bank sits there and still operates like it's business as usual. Should we not be changing this?
This is where agreements have to be entered with banks, because banks are also private companies, right? They can't be made to do what they can't afford to do. They also have their own risk management systems. If you're telling them, go and rent to this guy who has a rental property in Kibera and he has not been collecting rent anyway, when are they going to get that money back?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of complexities when it comes to how that money trickles down from the central bank down to the person who actually needs it on the ground. But if that was working, then the rental property owners would be able to get some money from the banks to be able to tide them over this period.
So that's why I'm wondering, so how do we make it work? Already, this measure has been put in place, the CBR rate and all these others, and the cash reserve ratio. All these have been taken into consideration by the regulator, by the government, by the central bank. And then here is the financial sector that is saying, all right, but I've got to assess my risk again. I've got to look at it. So it's not getting to the intended recipient. It's only the bank now that is operating with higher liquidity. How do we make the banks push this thing down? How do we, I think just looking at a clogged pipe, insert something there to push this thing through.
For real, Eric, it's really tricky. You have to get into agreements. You have to start giving loan guarantees. You have to start, making sure that they feel confident enough to send that money down to the people who need it.
So why can't this be done?
Easy. And actually, quantitative easing is it's very controversial way of providing for liquidity in the economy. So now we are thinking, well, if quantitative easing is not going to work, what else do we have in our toolbox to work?
Wangari, as we look at this, there are many ideas that are being pushed out here. At the end of the day, we were dealing with an already depressed economy. However way we want to look at it, Kenya was dealing with a depressed economy. Then add all these other things that we've added on top of it and say that now we are trying to help people. The question that we are being asked often is that, can we get to a place where really a government does not have the money to be able to have bailout programs for its people? Is that the point that we are at?
What I would say to the government is that after this whole pandemic, or even now when we're thinking about how this pandemic is affecting us, what do we need to inbuild in our systems to make sure that we can withstand shocks?
Exactly.
Now, my thinking is that we need to have that, what I'm calling underlying resilience within the country, to be able to have a strong foundation that will not sway us. How does this come through? You've already talked about it, you guys. You talked about health. Health is one of the primary foundations, right? People need to be healthy to be able to go to work. People need to be healthy to go to school, right?
Yes.
So we need a strong health sector. We need a strong education sector. One of my biggest fears is that we're going to come out of this and the education sector is just going to be the same, right?
We would not have learned any lessons.
We're all schooling our kids, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen what they're being taught? Do you think they stand a chance against those people in Denmark or the US? Right? We need to be asking ourselves, is my child going to be the next person who's going to, develop the next technology after AI? Right?
Yeah.
We're looking at our education system, and I really think it's failing. Now, education is one of the highest funded sectors in the budget, but I think we are not prioritizing or rethinking what the best education package is for our kids, right? So health education. And then I think I would also argue symbols, national systems and symbols of national unity. And you know why I say this? Because I'm seeing so many communities that are saying, they're working a mama on the corner.
Yep.
They're looking for work, but there are security risks. So what we're going to do is we're going to start building higher fences because these guys now, we think we're going to be robbed. That is exactly the opposite attitude we should be cultivating right now.
Yeah.
If we had strong systems of community, what we would be doing is saying, they are working a mama on the corner. We need to think about how we can provide...
How we can support them, even if they don't get a job.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so kind of bringing together our society and our communities to be able to help each other. Because, we know government doesn't move quickly. It's community that will move quickly.
I almost hear you saying that we probably need to take steps towards having a welfare arm of the state.
I wouldn't say welfare, no. I would say we need to strong cultural symbols. Even it sounds a little bit, I don't know how to call it. But, our runners, the people we are proud of, not welfare, symbols that bring us together. And we say that bring us and say we're all Kenyans, we're all able to, we're all working in this economy and we're all contributing into this economy. We need to support each other. Right? So I think those strong symbols.
Wangari, looking at what is happening now, what has happened with the COVID pandemic, and you seeing education is our most funded sector. Do you think now, and what we're seeing, what COVID has done to not just us but globally, that health then is the most important part of any economy? That with a good health system, then your shocks would not be as bad as we're seeing now. And therefore, we need to rethink and reconsider funding health significantly so that we avert such a situation in future, because this is not the last pandemic that we are seeing.
Well, it's one of the core ones, but it's not the only one. So we need to make sure we have good health. We have to make sure we have good education. We need to make sure that we are able to build from within. Now that we have been sequestered within Kenya, we're not flying out, we're not doing anything with other countries, or we're doing minimal things with other countries. How can we build our internal systems? We're big on agriculture in Kenya, but are we big on agribusiness? We need to think about how we take it to the next level, value chains. We need to make sure ICT is working, because that's where people are operating in this world, yeah? We need to think about our environment. If our environment is strong, if our wildlife is also thriving, then we can also build on that, right? We are talking about tourism being the biggest foreign exchange earner. If we are not taking care of the core that is bringing in this foreign exchange, then we are eating, into our own, we're eating ourselves without making sure that we're building ourselves up. We need to you guys were talking about, planning. Kenyans were the best planners, but implementation, nothing.
What's our problem? Where is that gap? What goes wrong? Where?
Sometimes, let me tell you, Eric, I've done so many studies, I've done so many trainings, but where I'm seeing the problem is that every year, without fail, I'm called to do those same plans and those same trainings for the same group of people. So I'm wondering, is it that I was not talking properly? Or is it that my information is not communicating? I think people are just not in that implementation frame of mind. They have the plans. We have beautiful plans. I mean, see, people are always talking about how Singapore came and just took our plans and all these things implemented.
Rwanda the same.
Ethiopia.
Exactly. Yeah, but another thing that you guys were talking about was systems, right? If the systems were working, we would have been able to deal with this much easier. Now, I know guys are going to bite off my head, but Huduma number. If Huduma number had been working,
had rolled out nicely,
been able to get, we would have been knowing these guys who are suffering from cancer, who need what was Dr. Karir talking about, the
palliative care.
Palliative care. Yes.
But doesn't the census report give you this data already anyway?
We have it.
The census report is even more comprehensive.
To start looking for that data.
It's there.
You need it digitized.
But it's already digitized.
It's already digitized.
Remember the sensors, they came with those
Came
gadgets.
with gadgets.
And
for
they asked you all
the-
these
But it's not just
questions.
They were
digitized
not writing it down.
digitized sake, right? You have to make sure that the system can pick up that data. You can't just put it in an Excel sheet and just be like, so the data is there, or it has been collected in a big database. It has to be a database that's queryable to say, we need to find the people who are vulnerable, and then, it's coded in a way that you can immediately reach these people. And by the time those guys are coming to the border at Blue Post, they have a gadget that they give their Huduma number, and then the government has said everybody with this coding from A to Z will be able
Is
to
allowed
access
to pass.
because they need care. Yeah. So Huduma number would have been perfect if it had been rolled out properly, if we had,
Plan
some,
versus implementation.
planning, exactly. It would have been great.
Coming back to the issue of how we are good at planning and then how bad we are at implementation. Is it a result of not wanting to work? Because you see, writing a plan, you just sit down and create a plan, and you feel so good about yourself that you did this so well. Much of it, of course, is copy paste from last year's plan. Remember that lady that we had hired last year, Wangari? She did a very nice paragraph on this.
her again.
Just go and copy that and post it here. and then
Angalia kama
combine
bado
this.
ako.
Hey, and then we can call her to come and do some training here and there, and then we can pay her, you get some money, and then we're busy. But when it comes to implementation, means you work. It means that you actually now get off your
Yeah.
desk and start doing things. Probably I think COVID is exposing the nature of our public system, our civil service.
Exactly.
And where we...
If I was a president or if I was a leader in this society, I would call all the CSs into the Zoom call of all Zoom calls. And just have a plan and say, you guys, we need to chambua this thing from start to finish.
Yep.
Where health is not working, but health doesn't stand on its own. Health is linked to transport systems, it's linked to energy,
Everything.
it's linked to water, it's linked to everything. So
Everything.
let's think about how we can create a system that is an interconnected network, that when point A is in stress, point B immediately can react to, to provide some relief or whatever it is. Yeah, I would throw out all the books, use them as a library resource, and then just take pieces and say, let's use this, and then make a system that works.
Yeah.
I hope the president is listening to me today.
But I wouldn't think I wouldn't even see the problem as being the CSs anyway. They keep on changing every now and then. But the people who are supposed to work and do the things remain the same. Your
But I'm
civil
not talking about
servants
the
are
CSs
still the
themselves,
same people who were there last year or there this year. If they're used to doing things in a particular way, even if you come with grand ideas, they'll still do their own things the way
I mean,
they do.
I'm not even talking about the person. I'm talking about the post. You talk about the person in that leadership position. And once they bring leadership and bring all these people together, those civil servants who have been there for 40, 50 years, right? Mm-hmm. They will be able to come with some solutions. But the problem also with government is sometimes we work very much in silos.
Yeah.
I worked for some time in government, and in as much as we tried to be collaborative, it's very difficult. I mean, to get one letter from one ministry to another, you have to write an actual letter, not an email.
No.
And then you're writing it to Gmail or Yahoo.
Yeah.
And, it's very, some of these basic foundational things that I'm talking about with underlying resilience. Make sure you have a system that works. Make sure you have a way of getting information from point A to point B efficiently, and the people who need to be notified are notified. Invest in those now so that when, X hits the pan, you can deploy immediately.
Let's talk about some of these things. I introduced you as somebody who, because you've worked in government, also because you work with government, because of the nature of work that you do, I'm sure you study a lot of data from government. Do we have money in this government, Wangari?
Tuko na pesa ngapi?
You know
why? There's a reason why we're called
I want to whisper.
a low middle in the...
I want to whisper this so that they don't hear. There was supposed to have been 1.2 billion shillings to buy some kits for community health volunteers, okay? And now we're not going to be able to do that. We'll have to wait for the next budget. And very many other things that we're saying, atuna pesa. We cannot support more vulnerable people because we don't have money. We cannot support... So do we have money?
Let me tell you, this thing, Dr. Kiro was talking about the community health workers and community health volunteers. You're not going to resolve that thing with just providing one kit in 1 year. It's going to help, yes, this year. I'm not going to deny. But we should have been resourcing them from the start. Those guys are so important. These are the guys who they they take their own bicycle, they go down to Mashinani deep.
Yep.
They bring, medicine, they bring information, they help people, they become actually pillars of the community, right?
Yeah.
But are they given stipends? No. This is out of their own pocket. This is out of their own time.
Yeah.
They put so much of their own resources in delivering this kind of level 1 healthcare.
Yeah.
It's insane how much you expect these people who are already vulnerable themselves to then now resource people who are vulnerable. But I guess societies is societies. Sometimes the people who are low income are the people who support each other the most.
Yes.
Right? So yes, it is much needed. This package is so much needed. But we should have been doing these things from Zamani, right? We can't just say this year they didn't get it. They should have been getting it. And if I'm talking about revamping this health system, you start with the level 1s. These community health workers, community health volunteers. If you get that working, let me tell you, the system it's not going to trickle down to the highest level because you'll have already dealt with it at the lowest level.
We're not even getting that kit this year.
The problem is not the money.
The problem is prioritization.
There we go.
You can have 10 shillings and you can have 10,000 shillings. Some people can be able to get so much more out of that 10 shillings than someone who has 100,000 shillings can get out of that money, right? It's just about how you think to deploy that money in the best way in the places that will have the best impact.
But Wangari, if you're talking about prioritization, here we are saying, no, we don't have 1.2 billion to kit the community health volunteers who would man our level 1 facilities. But universal healthcare is our big agenda, priority. We want to roll out universal healthcare. It doesn't make sense to me.
Because government is this big elephant that moves very slowly. By the time UHC had been planned and now it's being rolled out, do you know how long it took to get there? Then suddenly we're coming to say, oh no, we can't do this. And they're like, easy plans, we have planned, we have talked to 50,000 people, public participation, ilipanywa, everybody has agreed. We can't just decide one day we're going to stop and say now this 1.2 billion we're going to cut it. And I think
But Wangari, sorry to cut you short there. This 1.2 billion that goes to community health volunteers is a cog in that UHC monster that you're talking about. It's not even a cog, it's the base of that UHC thing. So if that is going to give you a good foundation, how do you say it's an elephant that moves very slowly? Yet this is the one that will give you a stable base for you to now be able to do all these other things.
It's your legs.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, Doctor, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that money has to get there. The reason why it's not getting there is because this elephant cannot move fast enough. Yeah, this elephant is saying, by the time I decide to now redeploy this 1.2 to community health workers, we have to go back through the whole system to start telling people and sensitizing and citizen engagement and all these things. And that's the problem with our system. Those things are important for budget, but then they also slow things down much. And government is just like that. It's just a very slow-moving animal.
All right. I have to ask you now at this point is that we've been able to point out all of these things and we see where the problems are. And obviously government knows that they're not moving as fast or as efficiently as they should. They can't say that they don't know this. This is glaringly obvious to everybody. Don't you think then that they would want to do something about it? Because we could talk this thing out until we're blue in the face. We could talk about it and say, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. But then in order for us to stop having a problem, then obviously something needs to be done about it. Is there some kind of awareness? I mean, from where you've been and where you've stood, where you've worked and walked, is there the desire to change this or to turn things around? Because if not, then I dare say we're doomed.
That is a question that I ask myself. I'm not sure whether there's a desire. I honestly, in some parts you'll find there's a very strong desire, and some parts you'll not find any inkling of a desire at all. I think I really worry about where Kenya will be at post-COVID. And I think it's because we are not really changing in the fundamental ways that we may need to change to cope in a post-COVID world. Now, if you look at the US, Italy, all these people who are hit hard, China, these are the people who, define the global marketplace, right? And if they change their systems because they had to make such deep changes in their economy, and we didn't have to make those types of deep changes that this country made. By the time they're coming out of their situation and starting to rapidly innovate and change to adapt, we are still in the same scenario that we were before. Guys are still here, busy on the streets, working. Yes, we have been affected in, people are working from home, service industry is been affected very much, right? But we may not change in the fundamental ways that these big countries that shape the world are going to change. Yeah.
We will look at how our budget should look like. So we are already seeing that statements that have been taken to Parliament. The National Treasury wants to tax us a bit more. It has to raise some money. But then how should our budget look like so that it can support those of us who will be vulnerable? And this, we are talking about 47 million Kenyans coming out of COVID. Everybody is going to be an vulnerable person. So, how should we deal with that?
Good morning. Good morning.
How are you?
Yes, fine, thank you. How is the team?
The team is fine.
Thanks.
We're fine.
Yes, I'm Daniel. I'm from Kisumu, and I'm a community health volunteer. And this is a very important discussion that you brought on board. And to contribute on this, I can say that the community health volunteers are not capacitated and well facilitated to do their job in terms of mobility, remunerations, and or a token of appreciation. They are the front for health providers in primary health care. And you realize that in Kisumu here, we have a very, very big problem in terms of remuneration and the tools that the CHVs have. The CHVs only do have, the kit that they have is only contains malaria testing kits and some malarial drugs. They don't have any other equipment that they can do their work. And apart from that, there is also a time that maybe Dr. Mercy Koril knows about the data capturing book called the MOH 513. They don't have it at all. And at times, in terms of remunerations, Kisumu has only relied on the non-governmental organization to finance the CHPs, and they are not in the payroll. But there is also this bureaucracy that is going on, in which the focal person is always being engaged in terms of remunerations of these CHVs. But it's very, very funny that these are the people that are operating, and even the challenges that they face, going even to the gated communities, where they always being humiliated. So when it comes to issues of CHVs, I think it should not be a boardroom matter. These people should come on the ground and see whatever people the CHVs are going through. Because these women and men, at times they spend sleepless nights dressing the defaulters, these defaulters. But whatever they get in return, they don't even get something in return.
They don't get anything.
An NGO comes on board and give them a token of appreciation. Last year we had Afia Ali, who was financing, and Access Kenya. But the county government of Kisumu has gone mum about this issue of CHVs. That's why even
it's a big issue.
Even the training itself, training is selective in that those people who are on the top brass, the focal person and the public health officers, they go to the training, leaving these people who are supposed to go to the field to who are going to interact with these people on the field.
I think we will actually set aside some time to discuss CHVs comprehensively and see what exactly is happening in this, because like you've said, these are the very most important cog in ensuring that universal health coverage works. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your contribution this morning.
Okay, welcome.
And keep listening.
Thank you.
So, Gary, coming back to this conversation, and you've heard what somebody who's actually a community health volunteer is saying in terms of just even getting basic remuneration, being basic equipment, just facilitating them to do the job that they have volunteered to do. It's still not working. And you've said this is a lot of back and forth. This elephant just not moving. The elephant is feeling an itch on its tail, but it really can't scratch its tail. because of whatever many other reasons that we have. Now, let's look at the budget. Finance Bill 2020 is before Parliament. It's already raising furore. People are saying some of the provisions there are tax more, raise more revenue, 2.7 trillion shilling budget. I don't even have a question. Just say.
Presented there, deal.
So I looked at this finance budget, and actually we're also going to be discussing it on Tweet Chat today. On one end, the government has given tax relief. But now what I think the government is trying to do is to find a way to plug that hole that has been created, right? So now that's why we're starting to see CG, digital service tax, which I have no idea how that's going to be implemented. How are you going to catch guys in the internet to make them pay? Yeah. Then we have like this voluntary.
They may borrow from Uganda. Uganda has done it exceedingly well.
Really? Exceedingly well, you would say?
Well, if we're going to use comparative analytics here, yes.
This thing, the voluntary tax disclosure, which I think is a good idea, but is it really going to happen in practice? If you're not paying taxes, are you going to go and put yourself there and say, I have not been paying taxes now, I need to start paying taxes? Yeah, so I think some of these things, plans, like we said, plans are there, but implementation, we've not really thought about it too much. Yeah. We need to really be thinking about how we can widen the tax bracket. People who are already there, people already paying taxes. The informal sector, as we said, 80% of business in this country is informal. How do we get them to formalize? And we need to think about practical, realistic solutions that we can implement to get people on board.
Yeah, but the word around is that you cannot tax yourself to prosperity. So if you're even widening the tax bracket or how you can get your taxes, is it something that we can say is sustainable?
But government operates on the taxes from revenues from taxes. Yeah. So if you're going to have these plans of healthcare, education, environment, agribusiness, you need something to do. You need some money to deploy those plans. That money comes from taxes. Right? So it's really, we need the revenues, but it's about the planning. How well are we deploying those resources to now get to a place of increased development?
So looking at a post-COVID period, what would an ideal budget or prioritization be so that you and I, everyone who's listening, can have an easier time recuperating, getting back into, some sense of normalcy, new normal as it will be then?
I think we need to ask ourselves, I guess, this question of underlying resilience, right? What is going to backstop our ability to thrive? Like I said before, we need to make sure that we are healthy people. The environment that we live in is also thriving. And we have to make sure that in our brains, we have the wherewithal to innovate, to learn and innovate, right? From there, we can start to build from within. We can now start thinking about business and innovation and AI and new ideas on how we can actually grow our economy. And then once we start thinking of these ideas and having those, then we can start to implement. Once we've created those plans, now to say, how can we take this plan to fruition, right? So I think if we think of those as three main pillars of how to think about the budget, then everything else follows. Right?
So what would that budget finance? Yes.
In the past budgets, our highest expenditures have been in energy, in education, and public administration and international relations. Now, do you even know what public administration and international relation is?
What's that?
Nobody knows.
Maintaining our embassies or what?
If you start looking at
paying our quota to IGAD, EAC, UN.
Now, you start thinking, is that really a priority for us as a nation, right? Health is number 7 when you think about our budget in how it's been resourced, right? You think about water, it's number 6, right? It's really down in the priorities, right? We are prioritizing the wrong things, I think. Yeah.
So if we say that our immediate budget, the budget that's going to be read by Ukuri Atani next month, should focus on how to, let's say, make Kenyans start living again, because right now we are basically not living. What did it fund immediately? So we can say, yes, put a little bit more money into health, because right now people are not going to hospital. They definitely will start going to hospital in large numbers after this. So what else, in terms of everybody who's lost their job and their companies are not going to reopen, what should the budget do to help those people?
Well, you have to put in some short-term measures. The cash transfer programs is a good way to think about plugging some of the immediate concerns that are happening with the most vulnerable populations. The challenge with cash transfers is that the systems that exist now, someone was talking about 20,000 people who are getting relief. It's because that system had those names already. Now, we have to think about how do you add more names as people start getting more vulnerable, especially in this situation. And it's not easy because there are a lot of criteria through which people need to be assessed before they're accepted in those programs. Yeah. In other quarters, in other countries, they decided to relax those criteria and start to get people in. And of course, there's going to be a lot of inefficiencies. Some people are going to slip in that don't need relief. But we need to have, that's going to be the price that we have to pay. Because the greater good, I think, is what we should be concerned about. But I would really like to see a budget that concentrates much more on healthcare, much more on education. And even, like I said, education is one of the highest funded sectors. But it's not just about prioritizing a sector. It's about looking, how does that sector work? How does it interact with other sectors? How does it address the issue of underlying resilience, right? So we need to restructure the sector in and of itself.
Okay, it sounds to me like homeschooling has really had a revelation for you. What?
You guys, I'm looking at what my child is like, and I'm like,
from practical experience. What have you noticed? What have you observed?
I'm just concerned that some of these things are not practical, and that, if I look at some of my friends in other countries, they're like, we're teaching our kids how to be creative and how to one is starting a business, another one is, providing ideas, to her peers, her peer group, and providing support to the communities. And ask me, what is my child doing? My child is learning about Tidri. Mount Kenya is a mountain in, it's good to know GHP, it's good to know those things, but we need to think, how is this information empowering us?
At least you know your country. You know your country.
Wangari, my sister, I hear you. I understand. I have to ask you, though.
It's important to know where you mine diatomite, where you get fluorspar in this. It's important to know Kariandusi.
If
you don't know those things, then you're not good at all.
Where you can mine gold in this country,
Yeah, I want to know. And then some people are like, you should make the kids too much screen time and all of that. But when I think about some of the kids who are going to be changing the world 20, 30 years from now, are those the people we're telling them, 1 hour screen time, and then in 30 years they're expected to be, doing AI and virtual reality using those same screens? Yet us guys were saying, I don't know, we need to think through these things more holistically. And I'm not an expert at this. I just noticed that they are cracked.
Well, just from what you see and what you understand, you said a few seconds ago that you would like to see a budget that was fueled by how the country looks, what the outlook of the country is. So are we saying that, at the risk of telling the truth, that the budgets that we see are actually not reflective of what is happening in the country?
The budgets are reflective of the key, like the big four vision of the president, right? I would put it to you that we need to restructure that big four vision, right? We need to make sure that the fundamentals are in place, and then everything else will take care of itself. If we're educated, if we're healthy, and we have a good environment to live in, the rest will take care of itself.
Let's open the phone line so we can get some questions from our audience. 0719-012-600. We are speaking with a public finance management specialist, Wangari Muikia. She is an economist. She understands economics and what's happening. Now, Wangari, as well as we're looking at this data, the data that came out of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics yesterday, indicating how battered we have been by this COVID-19. What do you read of it? So there's the first thing, many people have lost their jobs. We are also looking at the gender parity. More than half of the women population have lost their job. 30% of the men have lost their jobs. Many don't know when they're ever going to come back, into employment or into any sort of income. The other data is also showing us that life has become expensive. Transport is more expensive. They cannot afford rent. Food is more expensive. So what now?
Yeah. I'll talk about one thing that I've been thinking about lately, and this is the country's ability to respond to emergencies, right? We have this thing in the budget called the emergency funds, and that's at the national level and at the county level. Each county should have an emergency fund. So even as a first step, this should have been the first budget that we should have been deploying and saying, there's an emergency, let's think about how to budget for this emergency and deploy those funds haraka. But when you look at the framework around emergency funds, it is so hard to get any money out of that fund, right?
How come?
In a year, you can have like 10 billion in a fund, in the emergency fund. But the law says you can only access 2% of that fund in any given year. So what's the point of having so much resources? You can only access 2%.
2% of
right?
2%.
2%, yeah. And even that 2%, you have to go through so many hoops to access and give a justification why you can use that money. Sidra is a certificate signed by who? God has to be there. Sidra, you have to call the Pope. Like, it's so difficult, right? So some of these things are starting to show. We need to now revisit.
It's coming out of knowing our government. If you actually gave that money and you allowed the National Treasury to dip its hands at any time,
Yeah.
There would
be
be no
have
fund.
many emergencies.
There would be no emergency fund.
There'll be many emergencies every now and then.
Key. Accountability is key, but you need to be reasonable. So that when a real emergency happens, you're not deploying that money 5 years after the emergency has happened, right?
Yep.
So we need to be practical. And I agree, that people will dip their hands. Yeah, but we need to think about, we have experts in this country on, citizen engagement, security, accountability.
Yeah.
Think about the next level of accountability and how we can make things fast moving yet accountable.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think there's a large opportunity there.
All right. So, I mean, as we're looking at things, if we're going to give a forecast and say this is where we've come from, this is where we are, this is where we are going. I mean, it doesn't look very encouraging in the coming days or years. But even as the budget is given, and hoping that it will look at things that are important or pertinent right now. Do you see a situation, or how can we then foster a situation where things will actually start to get better by making, right decisions? Can we see that? Is that in the forecast at all?
I think it could be if we took this opportunity now where things have slowed down and people are rethinking things, if we took this time to rejigger the way government works, it would be so useful. Right? There are some very smart people who are thinking of ways to do this. Yeah, it just depends on whether they are heard. Right? The challenge is that also that government is hearing so many different things from very, very different quarters. Right? The international bodies are coming with all their money and their conditionalities and their advice. The private sector is also making noise. The churches are there, CSOs are there, and everybody is coming with their own piece of advice, yeah. And some of them are very valid and some of them are not very valid. So even the ability to sift through all the intelligence that's coming through and figure out what works and what doesn't work is a really big task. It's not fast moving. I told you, government can be an elephant. And also, you don't want to move too fast and make mistakes, right? But in a time like this, you just have to accept that some mistakes would be made, but accept that also that, we will hope that we'll get to a better situation than we're in, on the whole, at the bottom line.
Wangari, do you see us, what do you see for Kenya past this emergency state? What's your vision?
I really hope that we are able to take advantage of the situation we're in now and start building from within. Yeah, it doesn't help that the finance bill says they're going to start taxing some of the machinery that's coming into the country because they're trying to find money to plug this hole from the tax release, right? But if we're able, when this mask issue came, which textile industry pivoted very quickly and started producing masks. Ventilators, we needed ventilators, guys, mechanics, engineers in universities came together and started producing these things very cheaply. So the intelligence, the wherewithal is there. We just need to invest in it. Now, that's what the government needs to put their money in, research and development and innovation. And I think if we invest in our own people, we will find that we are more able to withstand shocks from within.
we can only stay hopeful, Wangari, that the government and the people that need to hear you have heard you. Yeah, that's the only thing we can do. Thank you very much for speaking to us. We understand that you'll be having a tweet chat on the Finance Bill 2020 today.
Yes, at 10 a.m. on our channel at Expertise KE.
So you'll just be there tweeting and talking about the budget. And anybody who has got questions can reach out there from 10 a.m.
Yes, please. Yes, from 10 a.m. today.
Asante sana. Have a good one. Wangari Muikia, Public Finance Management Specialist and the lead consultant at Expertise Global Consulting. Have a good one.
You too. Asante sana.
Bye.